Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon in conjunction with one of our security partners, ESET. Conversation today will be around a managed endpoint detection and response, that's MEDR, humans versus machines, which is more effective. Today in the room, you have the pleasure of myself, Nathan Holmes, our enterprise channel manager from ESET, and also Raj Kapoor, who is from the technical team at ESET and spends most of his time being the human part of the security service that we're going to talk about. So a little bit about myself. I'm an accredited cybersecurity specialist at Grey Matter, offering demos, consultation, and licensing. We do work very closely with ESET and many other cybersecurity vendors. As it says there, I am mad about anything motorsport related. And my most random fact is I once slept on a sofa that was liberated from one of Saddam Hussein's palaces when I used to work on a Marine base, which was 5-9 Marine Commander. So that's my most random fact, putting it out there. A little bit about us, if you're not familiar with Grey Matter and you're brand new on the call today, we are a software reseller, cloud service provider, focused very much on supporting developers and technology-led companies since 1983. We were acquired by Climb Global Solutions in 2020, which means we now have a worldwide presence with offices in UK, Canada, Ireland, and the USA. We have a vast catalogue of solutions from leading and niche vendors. Pretty much like to say to most of my customers, if you have a requirement, we will go out and try and find pricing for you or get you a quote or offer you a solution around something. We do specialize, of course, in cybersecurity, but we also have ISV, Microsoft, Embarcadero, and mapping specialist teams. We are an ESET partner, very proud to mention that fact. We have, as I've already said, a very close working relationship, and we do appreciate them coming down today and helping us present some of the material today. I will now hand over to both Nathan Holmes and Raj to introduce themselves and then let them present the content that we're going to show you today. So over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks everyone for attending today. Appreciate the lovely introduction and very pleased to be working alongside Grey Matter in this kind of conversation. In truth, my contribution is like Alfred to Batman, with Raj being Batman in this scenario. I'm here as more of the kind of the speaking head, as my role suggests. I'm the enterprise sales manager. To preface this, Raj and I approached Scott around this topic of conversation because we're just a couple of security stooges that absolutely love this topic of conversation. I would very happily take any questions, points, or any kind of opinions at the end of this as to what you thought about what it is that we said and whether or not you agree or disagree. Because ultimately, this is a topic of conversation that if we think has moved quickly over the last 18 months, I think we can all pretty much forecast that it's going to move a hell of a lot more quickly over the next 18 months. So appreciate your time today and all of this kind of stuff, but very much looking forward to listening to Batman run his piece. So Raj.
Hello there. Yeah, bit about myself. As Scott mentioned, I work in the pre-sales team with ESET. I am an enthusiast red teamer is probably the best way to describe what I do. If it can be broken, I try and break it. If it can be fixed, I try and fix it. Sometimes, usually I broke it, I can't fix it. That's usually the way that works out for me. And as Scott mentioned, I spend a lot of my time working with the services team, doing a lot of work surrounding services. And as Nathan mentioned, the topic of discussion has moved really quickly. There's so much context evolving around it that it's hard to keep up. And there's so much innovation in that area personally, from a red teaming perspective, there's so much that my imagination can do with it. Be that rightly or wrongly. I mean, it's being recorded, so I'll probably be in trouble at some point for it. So there's so much that can be done. with it from a red team perspective, but also a blue team perspective. It adds value, it adds help, and that's some of the points we're going to touch on through the agenda. As you see, the agenda for today, speaking of which, is as seen. We're going to talk about what the DRs are. When I say DRs, it's because I get bored of saying EMX, NC, DR, whatever the insert letter before DR. I get bored of, so I wildcard it, star DR or DRs. It's the only time I'll use a wildcard in security. It's the only time you should. Then we're going to talk about automation versus humans. Who wins? We'll discuss that tongue in cheek, I suppose, as best we can. AI. So what does it mean? How does it evolve? Where does it go? What happens from now? And doing a little show and tell scenario, or see the thing, do the thing, because it's always good to see it. It's always good to see it. Do what you expect it to do. Yeah, that is the plan. I'll no doubt I'll deviate and have to be kept on track like a leashed animal, but that's because I'm a nerd. That's what happens. What are the DRs? So what are they? If it's your first time encountering these terms, it'll be good. If you're a seasoned vet, this will be giving you flashbacks and cold sweats, and you might wet yourself. It depends on your experience with these. Overview of EDR. So EDR, it's endpoint detection and response. It helps you. It's an aid in your organization for security posture. It's your aid to your security posture. And I've highlighted the word helps there, because that is exactly what it is. It's a help. It's your endpoint sees a thing, it responds to a thing, bish bash bosh, job done. That's what it does. Again, it'll utilize a lot of, or many vendors, it'll utilize a lot of the aspects of automation, AI. There'll be a lot of that technology in there, whether it upstream or downstream of endpoints or somewhere in the cycle. And something I'll mention a bit later on is AI in the loop. That's a term that I've only just really discovered, AI in the loop and human in the loop, to counter viewpoints, but essentially what this is about, really. It's the use of endpoint products. Overview of XDR, that is another term there, that extended detection and response. It's more comprehensive. It extends your view. It's more visibility. Visibility go burr, I suppose, is more what it is. It's you see more, you can do more about things you see. It integrates all the technologies, your network protection aspects, your SIEM, SOAR, and it's that full holistic view of everything. You can respond more effectively. Can't shoot what you can't see, I suppose, is the right terminology for that, the right scenario. And what is MDR? MDR is a service, and I've highlighted the word service in amongst that. It's human-backed service. It's the addition of humans in that loop. It's humans monitoring, humans seeing. The provider does the day-to-day. That's what it is. Does the dirty work day-to-day, and it's usually outsourced to a third party. If you're a big enough company, you have those resources internally to do that, to manage all of that. But in this case, it's an outsourced service. So I've built a little summary there of what they are. There's 3 little blocks, just giving you a little sum up of what those are. And these are the most popular terms. There's others: NDR, network detection and response; CDR, cloud detection and response. Like I said at the beginning, insert applicable letter into this and you've got a DR out of it. You'll see combinations of these: MEDR, EDR, MDR. Yeah, it's alphabetic spaghetti. There's detection and response in there somewhere. Simple. So how do they all fit together? Now, this is, again, my viewpoint. As was alluded to at the start, I'm not an AI expert. I'm not any of that. But I have a viewpoint on how all these things fit together. And the hierarchy, it depends on how you've identified your assets within the environment, what's important to you, what you need, what you want. But ultimately, the idea is visibility. As you go up scale, you get you see more, you have more visibility of things, and you get more context around actions and things that happen. So where you go from EDR up to the M star DR, they love adding in random things into there. I'm finding out I've added that just now. Excellent. Yet more visibility and context as you go further up the scale, and that resource is outsourced more and more as you go towards that M star DR, MDR side. So the bit that I like, it's the automation versus humans. Automation also in reference to AI-backed automation, ML-backed automation, AI-ML automation, whatever. Again, insert the letters and throw a Scrabble tile set down and see what you make. Automation versus humans, nice and simple. I'm not a man of complexities. So benefits of AI and automation and that aspect of security. Trained to identify patterns. Really good at that big elements of collection, that big data processing, that number of correlated elements. It can correlate things together. It improves efficiency. Where humans might be inefficient at those things, it will give you more efficiency on those. And it gives you much more scope to work. Yeah, really improve those security operations center operations, activate or indicate indicators of compromise, show you those indicators of compromise, indicators of attack, and lets you prove and disprove hypotheses by collecting and parsing that data. That is its main key feature. But when we look at the human aspect of things, I mentioned indicators of compromise in the previous slide and indicators of attack. Those type of things are used in threat hunting. Many occasions you'll see threat hunting indicated as it's some sort of click button, run the thing, do the thing. I have a slightly different view on threat hunting. I have done that, and it's a creative and iterative process. You think how you can attack to prove your hypothesis or disprove the hypothesis. Is that thing possible? Logically, as a person, is it possible? Is that technologically possible? If I got creative, if I got a bit outlandish with it, could I get someone to do that? Could I get someone to click on that link? But it's that creative and iterative element that potentially you don't have with AI automation and the automated aspect. An example, something that I had an example of, I was asked, how do we run a point of sale system, for instance, in an enclosed environment. How do we, we're doing pretty well. It's a really sealed off environment, PCI DSS, all the good acronyms. We've got all that covered. Don't worry about it. No problem. Yeah, I mean, that makes absolute sense. From that standpoint, that's a really well secured network. But updates still need to happen. A human engineer still needs to go to that site where that point of sale system is and plug in a laptop. That means there's access. If there's access, I can exploit it. It's as simple as that. It sounds really bad on a recording as well, doesn't it? If I can access it, I can exploit it. But then I started thinking, how can I utilize that? I can use the resources of one point of sale system, one instance of that, to query the others in localized network and sap their resource to respond to those requests through a reflection attack. So from one idea of an engineer having to do updates, I've potentially got proof of concept of an attack. It's a contrived example, but it is, I mean, I'm not super creative. That's not like a Picasso masterpiece attack, but it's effective. It does the job, and it achieves whatever my goal might be at the time. And another point to note is that smart attackers don't raise big alarms until they want to. See, I would like to stay as quietly as possible when I'm removing assets from an individual. I have to reword the way I word that. I had a very particular way of saying that, and I can't use it. But if I'm removing assets from an individual, I don't raise alarms until I need to, until I want to. Sometimes that's to make a statement. Sometimes That's just a byproduct of the action I'm taking. And that's where attackers really live, is the informational space. Something that any AI worth its weight will deal with the reds, the ambers. It'll deal with those high critical, high priority alerts. But the informationals, like something simple, using ARP. Let's say there's an example a little bit later on hopefully in a video if I get the screen sharing right, that will show that. Again, very simplistic example, but I think valuable in the grand scheme. But yeah, AIs don't necessarily look at the informationals and give context. Is that type of thing a normal scan? Is that an admin who's got really good with PowerShell suddenly just running a scan on the network, or is it something a bit more sinister? Is it something a bit worse than that? Another thing being, AI is not perfect. It's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. Nothing is. Let's be frank. Nothing is foolproof. AI is a tool. AI is an enhancement. Much like suddenly if I got an extra arm, it'd probably be great for a little while, then really difficult to buy shirts. So poses you a problem at some point inevitably. Nothing's perfect. And an aspect of security that honestly I think is overlooked is that human interaction. So again, as part of a service that's provided, you have a human that interacts with you. At some point, you'll have people that contact you and go, did you know that this was going a bit sideways or a bit peak-tong in your environment? We should probably have a look at that, or we should do something about that. Humans have a tendency to make other humans feel better. Again, much like my parents don't deal with technology. Whenever there's any sort of automated element, they get upset. They shout at it, not obviously understanding that it ain't going to shout back, it ain't going to respond, it's automated. And that makes them even more cross. I should probably not make them angry, to be fair, but oh well. So, yeah, in my experience, humans build relationships. AI is an enhancement on those relationships and getting the job done. So, who's the winner? Who wins out? Well, security wins. Either way, that's who wins. Security of your business, the continuation of your business, that's who wins. That's security. It just depends on, I mentioned earlier, AI in the loop, human in the loop. It depends on which approach. It depends on which way you want to go with it. And again, if that's a new term, AI in the loop is AI taking the front seat, humans doing supporting work, human in the loop is the other way around. And in my opinion, AI in the loop is humans backed with AI. Apologies, other way around. And in my opinion, the best balance of creativity and personability, less error-prone capability, limiting risk. Again, you've got to think about the reliance on AI. Is that something we should rely on? Knowing what it can and should do and can't do, its limitations. So, in my opinion, I suppose AI in the loop is the better one, because you have the humans there, and then they're backed by the AI in the loop. The AI is taking a smaller portion of the work. Humans are always referenced. You're never fully taking out that human in that loop. And I think that's a valuable point. I think that's really important, not just for your security posture, but for the services that interact with people, for how effective something is, for how effective your security is. I think it's important, and it's required. So what does the future look like? What does the future of that look like? I suppose we're drawing conclusions, I guess. We're making conclusions on this. It's not finished yet. Let's be frank. AI is not at its peak yet, to be perfectly honest. It's still evolving. So much more you can do with it. The number of attack packages that I've thought of over the past weekend, just based around AI, using AI images to get people to click on them and do things. And yeah, there's so much that can be done Shameless plug, I've written an article on We Live Security on our website about voice cloning. Shameless plug, I'm going to plug myself there. Kind of famous now. Going to have to do it. But where are we heading? Where do we go? Where's it all leading to? So more blue team assets. You'll have more defenders free to do more. It potentially increases the scope. The driver, the skill set of defenders. So your blue teams are going to have to know how AI works. The large language models, what they are, what their limitations are, how to use them. You're going to need all of that knowledge, because when it doesn't behave and doesn't act the way you think it needs to act, you're going to need to know how to fix it, or find out where the problem is, or understand, even in some cases, that it's not working how you intended it to work, or it's not doing what you hoped it would do. Again, look at the malicious AI models, look at Worm GPT and stuff like that. Is that arguably, could that be working as intended, or is that a jailbreak of an entire large language model? I'd probably say it's a jailbreak for a large language model, but it's awesome as well if you get the chance to mess around with it. Please do. Yeah, again, I recorded, I've said it. Oh well. Yeah, so blue team skill sets are going to have to increase. There's going to be a lot more data floating around. So AI will gather that data it drops, that gives you that data. There's so much more to analyze. There's so much more to do with that data. There's so much more targeting defensive work that you can glean from that data that it pulls in. And that also allows you to identify things you potentially haven't seen before, that you didn't know were a problem because the data wasn't all in one place and correlated. It wasn't, that big data wasn't gathered and parsed. So you'll see things that you've never seen before, new behaviors by APT groups, new malware, new variations of things. The capacity to uncover new things is just insane. There's so much there. But let's not forget that not only do blue teamers have access to AI, like I just mentioned, Worm GPT as an example, your red teamers have it as well. People like me have that as well. And you can do some sus stuff with it. You can do some sus things. Malicious actors receiving capabilities of AI in the form of large language models, no constraints. When you ask Worm GPT, again, if you've ever jailbroke ChatGPT, if you've ever pushed a jailbreak prompt to it and see what it says, there's one in particular that I really like that makes it effectively just obstinate as hell. I really like it. It reminds me of myself. You ask it a question, it gives you the most sarcastic response. Anybody who works with me, Nathan, will probably attest to that. That is a thing that happens. And that's like before, after coffee, that's any time of the day. That's not even a time of day thing. That's a personality thing, I think. Automating tasks. AI, again, really good at automating tasks, building automation, building ways to automate. And those are things that are currently laborious to a human attacker. So if you can free up blue team assets, red teams can free up red team assets, which arguably is a dangerous thing. The more time I have to think, that's problematic. The more creative and weird and wonderful things I can come up with. So not always a good thing to give red team more assets and more time. So not always positive. And that means attacks are more sophisticated as well, because if you can get creative, your attacks are much, much more sophisticated and harder to stop and detect. Again, it can be used by red teams to exploit new vulnerabilities, find new vulnerabilities. Again, I pass code that I write to multiple different platforms and say, what's wrong with this code? And it'll tell me, oh, there's a buffer overflow exploit in it. Oh, isn't it? Excellent. Much like when they say all software is open source if you know assembly. If I know assembly, I get to the code, I push that code to a platform and say, what's wrong with this code? And it finds me something. There's potential for attack. There's ways to attack. It would also allow attackers to launch multiple different vectors of attacks, more convincing phishing campaigns. We've seen that before. That's something that we see out in the wild already. These more convincing phishing attacks built with more convincing tools in much more convincing wording. Because again, it's a large language model. It's literally in the name. It's a language model. It takes language and builds it in a way that gives you information, which is pretty much all language is, really, in general. It is just talking. That is what it does, much like Nathan does on demonstrations, just talking. And again, my article on clone voices highlights that. And I immediately think of back in phishing attacks with voice notes, AI clone voices, back in those phishing emails, those things sent in WhatsApp with voice notes to say this is really urgent. If you got the voice of that person, adds more credence, it's more convincing. And that data analytic aspect, you can, as a blue teamer, get all the data, analyze the data, find gaps, openings, defend them. As a red teamer, that data is invaluable. I can utilize AI to parse that and find me more specific targets, more lucrative targets, more interesting targets that might allow me to pivot elsewhere. As a red team, there's so much capability. Launching coordinated attacks can be used for that purpose. And again, ways to evade detection, methods of evading detection. So it can open up things like that. And if I'm not versed in those areas, and I'm not versed in certain languages, coding languages, attack types, whatever the case may be, I can find that information much easier and train myself in those with as little effort on my part as possible. So that sounds pretty horrific and hellscapey. It's post-apocalyptic Skynet nightmare. But the intensity of this maneuver warfare in cyberspace, there's always that secular maneuver warfare. We're always trying to outmaneuver each other and find ways to attack areas that are non-strength areas, to bring down the strength areas. There's always that ebb and flow, that twisting secular nature. And new and innovative ways to utilize tools and capabilities that are provided by AI and humans to defend yourself must be found. You've got to find those new ways. You have to. I see that again. I've mentioned it again. It's creativity. It's that creative nature, something that humans can achieve, something that humans can do to combat the newest threats, to combat capabilities, to find the newest vectors for attack. It's humans. I think that begs the question, what can actually be achieved now? What can we do now? So onto my very simplistic and contrived example, my little AI scenario. Like I say, it's a very simplistic view on it, but it was something that I think illustrates well the way that AI can be used from a red teaming perspective, because that's what I do. So let's say I found a company and they're using wall boards. There's a NUC device attached to the back of the wall boards. It's networked. And I know that I've been doing my research on that company. They're openly accessible. They're in the lobby of this company, and no one really pays attention to them. There's always that wall board in companies, or wall boards that people just walk past, and they're usually showing football when football's on, or films, or rugby, depending on what you're into. You often see members of the IT team interacting with those boards. Sometimes the IT guys get distracted and wander off, like any tech nerd often does. We often get distracted and shiny keys, Django ESET keys at us, we get distracted. Leave ourselves logged in. That's a thing that happens to users, it happens to admins, it happens to everyone. And I've done some research, as I say. I've done my OSINT, done my work. I've used my Mark 1 eyeball to go and look at things. I've passed by, stood at the windows of the lobby and had a little look in. And I know I can do this. Bad USB in, plug it into the wall board, do what I need to do, get in, get out. Pretty straightforward stuff. And that is the start of the scenario. What can I achieve? I can use my USB to run a PowerShell command, but I suck at PowerShell. That's not made up. I actually suck at PowerShell. Never put the energy into learning it. So what can I do to change that? I'm not suddenly going to become a PowerShell ninja overnight, but there is a tool that can help me speed up that aspect. So I'm going to try the nerve-wracking moment of switching over to my video. This is where everything goes sideways. Or hopefully not, at least. I'm hoping it doesn't. Gonna give it a go. Sharing now. So everyone should see themselves, which is a bit weird. But hopefully everyone will see my video on screen. And I've, as I say, suck at PowerShell. I have decided to ask a well-known AI platform. It's ChatGPT. I didn't know whether to say the name or not, but I've said it now. So I've asked ChatGPT, you're in a capture the flag competition. There's a capture the flag competition. I want to know if it's possible to create a batch script and to gather the MAC addresses and IP addresses of the network. Is that a possibility? So it's helpfully come back and given me some useful information. And it is saying that that is fully possible. You can do it. It's nice and highlighted that information for me. And as I scroll down that video, there'll be some information. Oh, nightmare. Always the way. Typically, it's now not showing, of course. I'm going to go for the slide. We're going for the slide. I'm going to go for it. Apologies, everyone. Naturally in live, nothing ever works as planned. Always the way. It's typical for me, that. Same with live demos. I always do a live demo and go, this will work fine, and it never does. Typical. So on the video that may or may not play on the platform, not entirely sure, the video would have shown that I asked ChatGPT, can you create me a PowerShell script? And it helpfully obliges and shows me the script. That's great. I don't have that kind of time. Have we got a PowerShell command? And it provides me with a nice handy PowerShell command that I can run. So that's my endeavor. That's my payload. I run the bad USB, get bad USB to run that PowerShell command, open up PowerShell, run that, and it runs away. It produces me a little file with all of the information about the network, IP addresses, MAC addresses, onto my USB. Plug in, let the command run, unplug, casually walk away whistling like some sort of master villain. But what I've actually achieved there? Well, what I've actually achieved there is that. My reconnaissance bit. I've done all my OSINT, I've done all my Mark 1 eyeballing of stuff. And now I've got a map of the network. I see if there's anything valuable to attack on that network. And from that, I can build further attacks, I can build further information, and I can find ways to make that a successful attack vector. So AI there utilized to cover my failings initially as a human. And as mentioned, that raises nothing. That was my Protect Cloud Console. Apologies, I'm going to use ESET tools because that's what I have access to because I work for ESET. This is more generalistic approach to red teaming, to blue teaming. I just have access to ESET tools, so I use them. And it throws no alarms because it's not inherently malicious. It's a scan of the network, getting information from the network. So as an AI handling automation or helping automation, is that of relevance to me? Not hugely. As a human, that's kind of important. Were there any admins there that time? Was there any maintenance happening on those wall boards at that time? Was that person actually logged into that machine at that time? All of these provide context surrounding that action. And this is our inspect console, again, using tools that I have access to. What you're seeing there is the informationals surrounding that. This is using ARP to just query the network to get me a list of information. Like I say, attackers don't raise alarms unless they want to, or until they need to. So as humans with enhanced visibility, this tool is used to have greater visibility of things that are happening on endpoints, on the network, lateral movement, things like that. So seeing more, it prompts you to those security questions. You ask, was there an admin there at that time? Were they distracted as they normally get, as we know they do when they're down at the lobby, down at the reception area, just looking at wall boards and the vending machines? What were they doing? Were they riding the lifts again, just chuckling to themselves? It's that informational space that can be a danger and somewhere where automation and AI may not look. So data on previous engagement would indicate that access to PowerShell on the board should be heavily restricted. We know that that's what should happen. And training your admin team to not go and play with the vending machines while they're downstairs dealing with the wall boards is probably a good way to go. Cybersecurity training on that, getting them back in training, help me keep on task. But also it highlights those misconfigurations. I suppose training is a misconfiguration. It's a misconfiguration of a human, I guess. They haven't been trained to deal with the thing. So it highlights those misconfigurations in the network and in the human resource, a bit of re-education, getting out the re-education stick and teaching people how they should and shouldn't behave when they're doing a job. So that's enough of my dulcet tones. I'm going to wrap up, try and get to some sort of conclusion in amongst my nerd ranting. So I mentioned earlier the value of humans within security cycle, and I mentioned that humans build relationships. They shouldn't be removed or replaced. That isn't what should happen. They should remain fully in that cycle, and again, in my opinion, my humble opinion, a driver to that cycle. They should be at the forefront of that cycle. AI should help them in their role, and that's how it should always remain. The creativity comes from the humans, and often always will come from the human. We, as a company, again, I've got to do the ESET bit, ESET hat back on, offer a range of services, security services. We utilize that AI in the loop methodology where you have AI upstream backing what we do. We pull in a lot of detections. We have machine learning and AI split model working through those detections, building the best possible methods of detection, the best possible rules for detection out the back of that. So that helps us build better technologies, enhances our services. So there are multiple benefits to that type of model, and it's really handy to have a service in amongst that to bolster your resources when you don't have the resource, potentially don't have the people, don't have the training, don't have the tool set. That's where it comes in real handy. But there's also many other benefits to that model and to the way that works. And I'll give a little soundbite that came from, say, my humble opinion, but this was me. Just quote my name at the bottom of it. It's ridiculous. Human services should never be removed or replaced. Humans are a vital part of the security ecosystem and a part of its experience, whether IT guys like it or not. We are part of the experience. Technology guys, we are part of the experience. We may all hate people, but people are what use our services and what use endpoints and devices, and we equally are a part of that cycle and a part of that service. And I did mention there was other benefits. So let's look at them. Let's go through them. Let's analyze them. Thought you were getting out the end of this. You're not. Everyone's here. We're staying. We're going through all of that. Let's go through all of it. Realistically, you can find this information anywhere. It's nice and simple. Cost of a secondary SOC service or an external SOC service can be pricey, but there's benefits, negatives. Depending on how you look at it, outsourcing a SOC may be the way to go. But there's costs to that. There's costs of a breach. Let's say if you don't have the right security in place, or having an MDR service or an EDR or an XDR, one of the DRs. I said I wouldn't do that. Star DR, having one of the Star DRs can potentially help you avoid the cost of breaches, help you with your insurance. Cyber insurance is a good one there. Reduce premiums, all that good stuff. There's a twist with this slide. You'll notice it's all very long words and not really my style. I'm not really that guy. All very intelligent. That's because it was written by AI. I didn't do any of that. All built by AI as well. So nothing to do with me. As you can tell, it was all very intelligent. And that is my bit done. I'll hand over and get out of Dodge.
Thank you, Raj. Very, very interesting. And as you've just seen from that last slide, how creative some of these chatbot features are becoming. I think, I know the reason I wanted to present, or get ESET in today to present this, was some of the high-profile security breaches that we've seen this year, from very large, well-known brands through to government data being leaked more recently, with very personal data being leaked as well. So it is for me about trying to stay in front of these threats, and as you've just seen, human and machine learning need to be working together to counter those threats. Going to open it up for some Q&A, so if anybody has any particular questions, please use the chat box. I believe it's on the right hand side if you have any questions at all. I'm getting some come in, maybe not showing up in the window. Okay, so one being fired our way. What is the difference between a traditional SOC and a vendor-led detection service? I believe that's a Raj or Nathan to answer.
I'll go. You go with that one, Nathan.
I take myself off mute finally. It's not like we've been working with IT for however many years. SOC for sure has its place. It wouldn't exist if it didn't. From that side of things, the one clear delineation between something like a vendor-led service against a SOC-led service is, as you can imagine, as a vendor, is we can only play well with our stuff. right? So let's use, ESET as a poignant example of this because it's who we are. If you were to look at leveraging something like our managed service and our kind of tools to help move towards the kind of the MEDR stretch of this kind of topic of conversation, is we can and collect a lot of information within your network. But let's say something was going wrong with a checkpoint firewall, ultimately that falls out of our remit purely from a liability perspective, because ultimately we don't want to mess around with technology that is outside of our control from a support capacity, to cause issues as an end user could have. Whereas SOC, providing a service on that level, the reason why the costs are so premium is because essentially they can ingest theoretically anything. Most SOCs can build you an ingestion model based on how far you want to go with that ingestion. Is it 365 as well as checkpoint, as well as whatever it is that you might be using within your estate, and also work out on a kind of cost per person. But the difference is that due to our kind of specialist nature, for me, SOC is the absolute pinnacle of what you can do from a security format. Now, for what I would consider is everyone else's rest of the market, is vendor-led service is a very achievable way of moving towards having a managed EDR solution. And due to the fact that as a vendor, we have already offset our costs of bringing these individuals in. The cost for looking at a managed vendor from a human element is far more significantly reduced, because ultimately our people, our costs have already been kind of swallowed and distributed throughout the business and all that kind of stuff. And due to the specialist nature of what we can do and our focus deliberately on our technology, is the level of service that we can deliver from the endpoint side of things is second to none, whereas a SOC has to be a jack of all trades, master of none. So it is always a very interesting topic of conversation. I think it's one that will continue to be interesting, as I think SOCs, due to them being new, are certainly priced accordingly because there isn't a mass market for it. And ultimately that has given vendors like ourselves the ability to really specialize and focus. Ours, for example, is UK based as well, so it's not follow the sun. It's a team that's 24/7 UK based down in our office on the south coast in Bournemouth. So if you want to come and meet them and shake their hands and see who's doing it as well, is you've got that functionality and availability from there. But it's a good question, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm aware that we're a bit over, but I'll take one more before we do the closing slides. Is this going to be new normal practice when considering cybersecurity and events?
100%. If people are looking at pursuing things like Cyber Essentials, ISO, even cyber insurance, to suggest that it won't be a part of the requirement in the next 18 months, I think is kind of a narrow viewpoint. You only have to look at how the car insurance industry changed the development of the car, or how home insurance has changed the security in people's homes, to know that it will be happening from a security element. We already see cyber insurance firms turning around and putting a one line, which is, what are you doing for EDR? Now, the irony is there is a lack of definition within the terminology that has left it very open to interpretation. I can promise you that will change based on the fact that we are engaging with cyber insurance brokers here in the UK, and they are getting to grips with understanding the technology so they can build it within their kind of documentation and their offsetting of the kind of liability and stuff like that. Similar thing with Cyber Essentials. You just need to see how it's changing with the introduction to 2FA being a key requirement for Cyber Essentials Plus, to know that the next logical step for them in securing someone's estate will be moving towards not only the detection and response element, but the managed detection and response element, which is that kind of that human element which has been discussed. So 100% yes. I will quite happily shake the man who tells me that I'm wrong on that one and say, let's catch up in 18 months and see who's right. So yeah, it's happening.
I definitely agree with that, and more on different conversations we've been having with our clients. They're being asked by customers to get certified. And I think the other consideration, especially with certifications, if anybody has recently looked into the new NIS2 regulations, which we are going to be holding a webinar on that. If you're dealing with any clients in Europe, some of the stuff that we've mentioned today, especially around EDR and reporting an event, is going to become much more critical in terms of getting it investigated and reported before something of a penalty happens. But yeah, we are going to do a separate webinar on this too, because it's quite important for anybody who deals with any of their customers out in Europe. Excellent. Thank you, Nathan and Raj. I'm going to go back a slide just momentarily before we wrap up for the day. We have a special offer for anybody who has attended the session today. If you book a consultation or a demo with Grey Matter and ESET, we are going to be, if this does go to a quote, we will be giving a percentage discount, which will be discussed further if you want to go and have a discussion with us. And incidentally, going back to the final slide, if you do want to get in contact with us, please, if you have been invited by your account manager today, please contact them in order to book myself or the security team on a call, or of course Nathan and Raj, as they are most knowledgeable in this area. And if you are in any of the local areas that are shown on the screen in the UK, Ireland, Canada, or US, please contact them. But we look forward to discussing this further if you have an interest. Thank you again to Raj and Nathan for attending our office today and presenting this. There will be a recording sent out in about 4 or 5 days' time if you want to re-watch it. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon and speak with you all soon.